Welcome, everyone, to the November 12th, 2024 meeting of the Carmel Clay Board of Parks and Recreation. Mr. Secretary, will you take the roll call, please?
Be more than happy to. Katie?
Present.
James?
Present.
Judy?
Present.
Joshua? Absent. Jen?
Here.
Mark?
Present.
Linus? Present. Lynn? Absent. Jonathan? I believe Jonathan will be coming in remotely here presently. So, Madam President, we have a quorum at this point.
Thank you. Would you please, or I'll call the meeting to order at 6:03. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Our first item of business is public comments. I do not see anyone who wishes to address the board tonight, so we'll move on to staff reports. Curtis, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Staff reports are included in your packets. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I also wanted to just say thank you to anybody on the park board that attended the Capra banner unveiling. I thought that event went remarkably well, and I'm extremely proud of our team and this department, so thank you.
And by remarkably well, he means that the banner was actually unveiled, so
The unveiling went seamlessly.
we
Went
are three
seamlessly.
consecutive banners in a row that it's successfully been unveiled.
Congratulations, the highlight of the event. It was a lovely event. It was very well done, and
Absolutely.
the remarks were very appropriate, Michael. I think everyone had a good time and enjoyed the celebration and got a little bit of the pride. So, any questions for Curtis? All right, then we will move on to committee reports. I don't believe the Finance Committee has met, correct?
Finance Committee has not met, so nothing to report.
Okay. Master Plan Review Committee, we have
We did not have a meeting, and I believe our committee has concluded its purpose.
Thank you. Strategic funding, Mark?
We have not met.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to minutes of the October 17th Park Board meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the Park Board meeting dated October 17th, 2024.
Second.
Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? There was one with a tense, I think, on Joshua. The city had hosted, that's all, that's minor. Anyway, the MobiCon had already happened, I think, by the time, but that's minor. So, all those in favor of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, we have to do roll call. I'm sorry, Eric?
As long as Jonathan's not on, we're okay. Only until Jonathan comes on. do we
Comes
have to
on,
do roll
okay.
That was my question. Until he gets on, we can do a
Okay.
consensus or a, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, staff. Next are financial reports. Jen, will you do the honors?
Yes. I move to acknowledge receipt of the consolidated financial report for September 2024 and the Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation P&L statements for October of 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Linus, thank you. Are there questions regarding any of the financial statements before us?
Just one. Curtis, how do you feel that we're going to end the year?
Feeling pretty good. I think we're heading in the right direction. I don't foresee any challenges in achieving cost recovery for either any of the non-reverting funds. So things are trending very favorably.
Perfect, thank you.
Jim?
Just a question on the gift fund 853. We have nearly 140,000 in there. Does that roll over every year?
That is also a non-reverting fund, so yes, they do stay with us. They don't go back to the city or anything. We keep those in our accounts.
And have we spent much out of it for the year?
Hold on just a second. We have. Looks like we've spent around $18,000 this year,
Out of what?
the gift fund.
The gift fund. You know which one of those it was?
Are you,
It's a variety of those, so some of it came from spending towards staff appreciation, some of it was for the master planning of Bear Creek. So there's a variety of different things that we spend out of there. That would-
If it would be possible, in the future, if you could have a column that indicated for the year what has happened to these balances that we start out with.
Sure.
Is that possible?
Any other questions or comments? Okay, are we ready to vote then? All those in favor of Jen's motion signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to claims.
Thank you. I move to approve the claim sheet dated November 14th, 2024, the Carmel Township claim sheet dated November 14th, 2024, and the payroll for October 4th and October 18th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions or comments on those three items? Ready then to call the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. We'll move on to monetary gifts, grants, partnerships, sponsorships. Eric?
Last month, we only received one donation, which was from our anonymous donor for our staff appreciation. So it was a lighter month, but I will report that we did receive a grant as well, a pretty significant grant for some tree planting and things as well, that as soon as I receive those funds, that will be on the report as well, to be able to report to you guys. But that is good news that we did receive a pretty good grant that Carrie was able to work with the PNR team on. So once that comes through, I'll give you an official report, but that's what I got for you this month.
And that was the maximum we were eligible for, right? The
I
20,
believe so. the
25 is what I remember. Okay. I would entertain a motion to accept the gifts.
So moved, and I'd like to thank the anonymous donor for staff appreciation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Linus, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We're on to new business.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, I am asking the Park Board to consider a new agreement for porter services at CCPR facilities. If you're not aware, currently, we are utilizing Corvus Janitorial, for cleaning services at several locations around the department, including the Monon Community Center, the water park, Perlman and Wilpont Pavilions, Lestermeyer Commons restrooms, and the administrative and park maintenance offices. To better understand how we've kind of gotten to this point where I'm requesting that we consider new porter services, I think it's important to understand the history of cleaning services at CCPR facilities. Pre-2011, cleaning was conducted in-house. Our department had many challenges with that, in particular with the quality of the cleaning and then staffing. Anytime you're managing part-time staff, if you have call-offs, a lot of times it's hard to backfill, and so there were just a number of challenges with the staffing. In 2011, we solicited our first quote for porter services. We began working with Corvus Janitorial. They were the low quote, and we've worked with them predominantly since 2011. Overall, I would say the quality and consistency of the cleaning that they provided, or the cleaning that they provided, has improved in lieu of trying to contract those services or conduct those services in-house. Post-pandemic, we started to see a pretty large decline in the quality of the cleaning that Corvus was conducting. And in conversations with them, they attributed a lot of their challenges to staffing post-pandemic due to things like inflation and being able to find and retain quality staff. And another big reason for that was their original contract with the department didn't have an escalation clause. So they weren't able to offer competitive wages, which made it nearly impossible for them to keep staff or find quality staff. Just what they were paying just wasn't good enough. In 2021, they notified CCPR that they wished to renegotiate their original agreement for obvious reasons. So instead of just renegotiating with them, we decided to, it was in the best interest of our department to solicit a competitive quote process at the time so that we could weigh all of the options that were available to the department. Ultimately, Corvus ended up being the low quote again. And we ended up renegotiating their contract in the latter part of 2021. And really what that meant for the department was a $77,000 increase to their original agreement with an escalation clause of 3 to 5% annually, depending upon the consumer price index, just to help them with staffing needs and some of those different things. What I would say is after we made those adjustments, we noticed quite a bit of improvement with cleaning in 2022. Unfortunately, in 2023 and 2024, we're kind of back to square one where we were post-pandemic with Corvus. We're having a ton of quality control issues, particularly at the Monon Community Center. We've met with Corvus multiple times to address the concerns, trying to find a reasonable path forward. How do we move forward with this contractor? In the last year, those challenges have really peaked, and ultimately what we've been told is that Corvus is continuing to face really the same staffing challenges that they had post-pandemic. And it's kind of a finger-pointing game. The franchisee is blaming the franchisor, saying that the fee, or telling us that the fees that that were increased in the agreement weren't passed along to them, so that they're not able to pay equitable wages. The franchisor says that's not true. Again, we've been kind of caught in the middle, and the quality of the cleaning has been suffering as a result. It's really unfortunate. What it comes down to is we have to have better service. That's what the community expects. People are spending their discretionary time and income at the community center. We just have to have better porter services. So given the recurring issues, we did choose to solicit quotes for a new cleaning contractor in the Carmel area. We put together an RFQ. We worked with Park Board Legal Counsel to develop that RFQ. That RFQ was sent to 12 vendors, and we received quotes on October 25th, 2024. We did receive 3 quotes, one from Janney King at $445,600. They were the low bid. Coverall and Corvus. Corvus also submitted a new quote. Ended up being the high quote. We are recommending that the park department or the park board consider Janney King and acknowledge their low quote of $445,660. I did want to point out that if we had continued to work with Corvus and they had implemented their 3 to 5% escalation clause at 5% this next year, our cleaning services in 2025 would have been around $394,000. So what it comes down to is it's about $50,000 more, but we're confident. We feel pretty good about moving forward with Janney King. Our staff has checked references. They're cleaning a lot of businesses in this area, including in the Indiana Historical Society, the Ronald McDonald House, and several Buckingham properties. If you're not familiar with the Indiana Historical Society building, it's 165,000 square feet. It's huge. We got a glowing recommendation from them. So again, we feel very comfortable moving forward with them, even though it is a $50,000 increase. I did want to point out that their proposal does include an escalation clause, just like the current agreement with Corvus does, 3 to 5% annually. And their initial terms are for 2 years. So this $445,660 is going to be would be locked in for 2025 and 2026. So in 2026, had we been working with Corvus and they implemented, their escalation fees, that variance ended up being about $30,000 more than we would have paid had we stayed with Corvus. I also wanted to point out that their proposal also includes all cleaning and equipment needed for the cleaning and reporter services, just like the current agreement that we have with Corvus. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
I do want to make one note too. If you choose to move forward with the recommended motion, there is a typo. The dollar amount should be $445,660, and it does say 600. So
Oh,
just
thank you. Yeah.
just want to make sure that the right amount is read, if so inclined.
Madam President,
Jim?
I move that the Park Board accept the quote for cleaning services from Janet King in the amount of $445,660 and authorize Director, Assistant Director, and Park Board Legal Counsel to complete the contracting process.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jen, thank you. Further discussion or questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Linus.
Reading the sentence here about, once again, facing challenges and retaining skilled staff. Is that going to be the same with a different contractor, you think? Is there a feeling about that?
I hope not. I think we'll find out. Yeah.
True.
I hope not. I mean, that's a big reason why we checked the references and went through a couple additional steps that maybe we hadn't done previously. I don't know if we did that previously with Corvus or not, Michael.
We had.
Okay.
And in the beginning of the contract, we had really great success with them. So it really was until, around the time of the pandemic that we experienced the most significant problems. Other times when we had challenges, we'd work with them and they would address them. We just, this time around, have had the recurring cycle where, maybe it gets better for a week, a couple weeks, but then we're right back, if not worse than where we were. But yeah, originally we did checks and they came back very favorable originally. But,
It's definitely a risk that we're taking. I would say that in analyzing all of the quotes, the porter services, at least the cleaning, the portion that's specific to the community center and the water park did go up quite a bit with all three of the quotes that we received. So I would assume that they're taking into account, and I think with the experience at the the Indiana Historical Society, it being a comparable facility, they would have the quote pretty dialed in. So I feel pretty good about it, but it definitely is a risk we're taking.
Are we committed then to a 3-year contract?
2 years.
Excuse me, 2
Two-year
years,
initial
okay.
term, and then after that, it would be auto 1-year renewals.
Okay.
And then, if we were continuing to have issues, we would likely go through this process again.
I got a couple of follow-up questions.
Go ahead.
So going with Janie King, are they going to throw the same amount of manpower at this contract?
Yes, the RFQ is very specific on the manpower requirements and the hours that we expect their cleaners to be there.
And maybe this is my last question. Are they going to be identified as who they are when they're on our property?
Absolutely, that's a current requirement of our porter services, and that will be a requirement with the new cleaning company as well.
Oh, one more question.
Yes,
When they're on our property, who do they answer to?
they usually report. They report to one of our maintenance coordinators, but they typically there's a franchisee that's on site and helps oversee the staff that's there. So, are you
So-
talking about it on our staff or on their team?
On our staff,
Yeah, we have a maintenance coordinator that's assigned to them.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad to see it's been addressed too, because I've heard comments when I'm over there to it. Not that I particularly have noticed, but especially around the bases of all the equipment and whatever. There's been some complaints from some of those that are over there every day. Go ahead, Katie.
Do they have to go through background checks?
They do. That's part of the contracting process, but that is outlined by our current agreement. So.
Thank you.
And then there were some groups of people around looking today at the Monon Center, looking like they were doing an inspection. Are they assessing for this, or are they there for something else?
That's likely, in the last month, I think the Corvus team has sensed that maybe this isn't going in their favor. And so their franchise, the upper management, the executive management has had a larger presence than we've had before, so.
Okay. Because somebody was like with a clipboard and they were,
Yeah.
apparently,
too little.
I
It's-
didn't see it, but it was reported to me.
It's just too little, it's too little, too late.
Too little, too late.
It should have been, that's been the expectation since day one. They've had staff that have done that in the past, and really post-pandemic, that stopped happening, even after numerous meetings and stuff, so
Okay,
it's unfortunate.
understandable.
And one thing to note too, we have not informed the three respondents yet, because we didn't want to let them know until we have
Oh,
the
action.
consent. So
Okay.
they don't know definitively that they do or do not have the contract moving forward.
Any other questions? Are we ready for the vote then? And Jonathan is still not with us, right? So we're, okay. Alrighty. All those in favor of the motion for the new Porter Services signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next is resolution regarding director and CEO compensation. Mark?
Yes. I'd like to take just a minute and make sure all the board members that are here understand why we're looking at this resolution. In the past, from the time I became director to present, it's been historically the job of the president to make a decision as to the compensation for the director. Over the years, I can honestly tell you that has been somewhat hit and miss. And this year, there was a change with the city in the way they were compensating some of their directors that we found out after our budgeting process. And it was deemed by Judy to look into the matter a little bit more, and she created a personnel committee of herself, Linus, and myself. And we've been looking at this particular issue as to how to properly, and staff, was that it was best that we have a committee going forward that is formed under the president, so that it wasn't just one person making a decision of what the compensation would be for the upcoming year, but a group of park board members. And what we're trying to do with this resolution is to address the long-term issue that we've had, and to also make sure that we're in compliance with CAPRA, which we probably aren't as close as we'd like to be with the current practice, which is undocumented, I guess is the best way to put it. Which is not uncommon with many other park systems. So what Curtis was able to do was work with us to come up with some language, along with the help, I think, of Michael as well, that is a better mirror of what we're trying to accomplish when we look at the compensation of the director on a more formal basis going forward. And that's the purpose of the resolution, and I think it clearly does that and puts us in best practices, once again, with other departments that have cost recovery mandates. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes?
Go ahead, Jen.
The only question I have is when it comes to the review and approval process, the timeline there. If we're waiting until December 31st, when the board president's term, I guess, could end that first board meeting in January.
Well, the December 31st is a by-to date.
Okay.
In reality, our belief would be that this would happen closer to the same time that we're doing compensation changes. So it would be a component of the budget process with the department going forward.
I guess then, wouldn't we want this review and approval process to be synced up with the budget process then?
Very much so.
And so then,
However, it doesn't have to occur until the end of the year for the change to come into effect.
but from a finance standpoint, I would want it in the budget.
That's fine with
No,
me.
I'm just saying, like, if it being presented, right, like, I'd want those numbers I'd want that number known, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why I don't know why we're doing it in two different, I don't know why, whoa, sorry. Why it's two different processes for staff and then for director. Like, why can't it be done at the same time?
I think part of the resolution also includes the performance evaluation, and so I think the park board has to be able to evaluate whether or not the director is, carrying out their responsibilities as expected, and so that would mirror, the same performance appraisal process that we have in place for staff. From a budgeting perspective, it's really not that complicated. I can put a placeholder in place for a certain percentage each year as discussed with the finance committee. And, it likely wouldn't exceed what I would budget, but I mean, that's a conversation I'm glad to have with.
And then when are the performance evaluations done for staff? By the end of December?
They're typically being put together anywhere from the beginning of, or from the beginning to middle of December, and they have to be provided to staff by the end of the year so that they can be implemented by the first pay period in January. Sometimes staff are receiving them until January 2nd or 3rd, but the first pay period is usually, a little bit later in January, so.
So Jen, it is an attempt to get it synced up better.
Okay.
Than it has been. It is, and I just was not comfortable with the size of our operation and our budget. I just felt like we needed to have something clarified. My experience has been in the old days.
Oh, no.
before.
No, I'm just thinking of our salary and wage resolution that's done at a different time than this. That's what I was thinking.
What our plan would be, I think, and not necessarily I'm talking for the committee, but the department would be already looking at what the appropriate compensations would be across the board, and it'd just be like we've done in the past, where there's a percentage of maximum, and that the committee then would stay within whatever was approved as the maximum. If not, then it would have to come back to the board to raise or make a change to the salary resolution.
What was happening previously is.
Oh, wait, please understand, I am not, oh my
Oh, no,
gosh.
I know.
Understand, I am not questioning whether this should be like a written down process. My only question was timing, so.
Yeah, I think that, as Judy explained, the timing is consistent from a review standpoint with what the department's doing. But what we want to do is make sure that we have a handle from a budget standpoint that it has a range in there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I move to approve Resolution P-2024-001 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jim, thank you.
I'm done talking.
Is it your fault?
I don't know.
Maybe. I'm just wondering. It used to be tinfoil in the old days. Any further discussion? And thank you, Mark and Linus, for serving on the committee, and Mark for chairing, so that this came out looking professionally well done from Curtis with all his good input. So we have a process going forward for the next few years. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I've got a question.
Oh, Jim, go ahead.
I'm looking at this resolution, and it calls for an AI vote.
Oh, we'll sign that later. That's,
That's the format for all of our
That's the
resolutions now.
yeah.
We record how people vote. That's just the documentation.
Okay. Well, I haven't seen it before.
Did I declare the motion carried unanimously? Thank you.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your work, because it took a lot of time for Curtis to do the research for us, make sure we were putting together a sound policy going forward. Moving on to resolution amending and restating the rules of park operations. Michael?
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight, I'm bringing forward Resolution P 2024-002, which would basically restate and provide some edits to our existing rules of park operation. We discussed this a little bit at one of the previous meetings, but there's a couple reasons for this. First of all, again, sort of Mark talked about CAPRA for the previous resolution. This is something that CAPRA encourages a periodic review as needed for our rules. So this is one step in demonstrating compliance with our accreditation standards. But more importantly, you know, what we want to do is ensure that the rules that the park board approves, because there are two entities that can establish rules that govern our parks. First, the park board, of course, and that's power is granted through the interlocal cooperation agreement and is consistent with Indiana park law. The city council can also establish city codes which can govern usage of the parks. And by and large, the rules as adopted by the park board are pretty similar to the rules as codified by city council, but there are some variances. So one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is ensure that there's uniformity ultimately between the park board rules and city code. That becomes increasingly important as we work and hopefully soon have a park resource officer agreement in place, because without it being in city code, police officers cannot enforce the rules. It has to be in city code for them to be able to enforce it. So that's part of what this process is to do the review, make sure the park board has consensus on what the rules are, and then present them to city council and request their codification of the rules so that city code and park board established rules are completely consistent with each other. It's been a few years since we last reviewed the rules, so some things, circumstances have changed, new information, feedback that we have from the public. So a couple of the bigger things that we're trying to accomplish in here that were not previously in the park rules or within city code. First and foremost, you know, we're looking at ensuring that, again, the police have the authority to enforce the rules, but if there are violations to the rules, that there is also a stick, if you will, where that they can issue tickets that have a monetary value that increases with recurring offenses. This was something that we noticed City of Indianapolis has for their parks, and a lot of park systems around us also have the ability to issue fines. So again, a fine doesn't have to be issued, just like a police officer doesn't have to issue a speeding ticket, but it does become a mechanism that's available for them if deemed warrant. So we're adding that. Another thing that is proposed within that's different from our current rules is that we have an explicit statement in there regarding lewd and inappropriate behaviors. Again, you know, the police can enforce any of the ordinances or state code that pertains to that, but again, it ties it specific to the parks and something that I think, as much as anything, is an important policy statement to make. One of the things that we've heard, especially from our Hindu community, is a formalized process that allows for the spreading of human remains, cremated remains. State law makes that permissible, but we don't have a formalized process. So we looked closely to the National Park Service to see how they handle these types of requests, the process that are in place. So that's something also that is newly established within here. One of the things that was critical for me as I tasked Curtis to look into this is that I wanted to make sure that there was a clear understanding that if someone spreads remains somewhere within the park system, that doesn't become sacred ground. You know, just because you spread something there, you can't put up memorials, you can't, I mean, it is a quiet, contemplative thing. For our Hindu community, what they're more interested in is ensuring that they have a place where they can put the remains, especially in flowing water. consistent with their faith traditions and stuff. So we contemplated that. We made a couple, there's some areas where there are similarities but slight differences between city code and park rules. Like, for example, a number of years ago, the park simplified our hours of operation for the parks themselves to be sunrise to sunset. Originally, they were a half an hour before sunrise to a half an hour after sunset. Makes it a little bit more confusing, so we simplified it. That never got codified. So some of the things that we're putting in there relate to that. We also, the city council recently adopted the designated outdoor refreshment areas, or the DORAs. That's already codified, but it's not within our park rules, so we felt it was important, again, to marry those so that they're consistent. A variety of other minor changes. Probably the other most notable one, it relates to water activities. So currently our park rules as well as city code prohibit swimming in basically any body of water that isn't a swimming pool. What we did is maintain that for like the ponds and the lakes, those type of places, but we allowed it where it's not explicitly prohibited by signage in creeks, because thinking of Flowing Well Park, you know, obviously we encourage the creek stomping, so we didn't want it to appear like that was prohibited by park code. So we put that, but we also specified that it is at your own risk to do so, making that realistic. And then we also clarified where you can and cannot put in watercraft, motorized watercraft, unless you're in the White River, which is governed by the state, is prohibited. For non-motorized watercraft, again, we can't control the White River, but at the same point, there may be opportunities, especially based on the feedback we had from the public through the master planning process, of an interest in more kayaking and those types of things. It may at some point be appropriate for us to create designated places in bodies of water within the park system for kayak. So it doesn't allow that today, but if we create designated spaces, it would allow it in the future. So it gives the department the flexibility without us being in violation of park rules or city code. Provided in your board packet is a red line. I think it actually appears as blue and purple, but of the changes that we're proposing. And then in my cover sheet, I summarized whether we were changes in both, or it's to bring city code and park rules into consistent verbiage. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you have. With this, if you're interested in moving forward with it, that's great. We'll be able to move the process through city council. I've already secured sponsors from councilors Snyder and Taylor, so we can move the process forward if the park board wishes to take a little bit of time. This isn't completely time sensitive, other than we want to have it in place before the park resource officers are actually assigned to us. With that, again, any questions you may have?
Questions for Michael? Jim?
You lowered the bicycle speed from 20 to 15.
That is correct. Currently, it is 15 miles per hour on the Monon Greenway within the central portion of the Greenway. Forget the exact parameters of it, but roughly 111th Street to maybe Smoky Row, or that approximate area. The outer portions are currently 20. Within the parks, they're technically 20 because everything is 20. We've heard a lot of feedback about concerns about the speed of bicyclists and other mobility devices on the Monon Greenway. We felt for consistency's sake, 15 miles that way, it's the same everywhere. Two, as things get more crowded, when streets get more crowded, the speed limit tends to go down. We know the Monon Greenway is extremely well utilized, so we felt that based on the feedback we're receiving, feedback that we've heard through CCAT, that we're proposing just taking it to 15 throughout the park system and throughout all of our trails.
How do the police determine speed?
So in the past, we had been informed that the radar devices did not work with bicyclists. Our engineering department has a portable, one of the speed signs that tells you how fast you're going. They actually did some experiments with it in the parking lot of City Hall with their bicycles and identified that it was within a couple miles of being accurate based on the speedometer they had on the bicycle. So that would suggest that radar guns will be reasonably accurate as they are clocking bicyclists. It ultimately is, it's an enforcement issue, as in any of the park rules are, and enforcement falls to the police department. But they have the means to either by keeping pace with them and/or using a radar gun to assess the approximate speed.
Well, I think most people have confidence in the police when it comes to automobiles or vehicles like that, but you're saying reasonably close, not accurate.
Well,
I just wonder how the court is going to handle that.
I would never surmise or guess how a court's going to rule to anything.
Yeah, but
Jim, I would guess that somebody's going to develop something that actually does work, because this isn't an issue just on our trail. It's an issue all over.
I will note that the proposed changes, everything that's in here has been reviewed, was provided to and reviewed by Chief Sterling. So we have his support for what's being proposed.
the police chief,
Couple of questions.
have you,
Other questions? Go ahead, Linus.
Two bullet points. I just want to throw my thoughts out there. One is the motorized vehicles on Greenway, specifically citing golf carts. Now, I think we all know I live right on the Monon Trail, all right? And I see a lot of traffic that goes to and fro. And there's an increasing number of golf carts, usually at dusk. Not during the day, not nice and bright, shiny days, usually in the evening and thereafter. And there are usually, I don't have a radar gun, but they're usually running at a high rate of speed for a golf cart and high rate of speed for people that are pedestrians walking on the Monon. And it definitely seems to me that the majority of those golf carts are being driven by somebody under the age of 15 or 16 years of age.
Yeah.
So I'm witnessing this more and more and more all the time. Now, and that's just my little snapshot of where I am on the Monon. So if it's happening there, it's most likely happening at a lot of other places along the Monon.
So technically, they're already prohibited on the Monon. We just wanted to make sure that it was crystal clear that they were prohibited. So this is something that we'll talk with our friends at the police department to ensure that that's something that's being enforced. We especially felt it was important to make it crystal clear that we intend for them to be prohibited. One, just like you stated, they seem to be more and more used in the communities too often. I agree, they appear to have young people driving them. But two, I know Westfield is looking if they haven't already implemented the ability to use golf carts on some of their trails. So there will be a sign as you enter Carmel that makes it clear no golf carts, because I don't want them thinking just because their mayor supports the use of golf carts on public trails that's something that is likewise supported in Carmel, because I just think it's a really bad practice.
Well, it's as congested as it is in the area where I live, because you get closer to Midtown and Main Street, the congestion goes up.
Exactly.
Or gets more dense, however you want to word that. And to get around the foot traffic in a golf cart that's 3 or 4 feet wide and people walking side by side, it's really it's just a matter of time that we're going to have probably a more serious situation. If they're on the street, you just get on the street and just get on the street, we're all good.
If it's on the street, then it's not my problem. Not that,
It's not our problem. Exactly.
unless it's a park street, so.
That's right. The other bullet point I was reading here, prohibits use of motorized boats or watercraft within CCPR lakes, ponds, or creeks. I understand that. However, some of the creeks, we have people in them stomping people, people in there looking for frogs and whatever. And then we incorporate some RC boats. So I know it doesn't say anything about RC stuff, but is that deemed to be a possible issue with RC motorcraft?
They're over in the reflecting pond, right? That's the model? But we don't govern that, and. no,
That's a good question. I don't think, I can tell you, I wasn't thinking of those as I was considering the proposed language within the rules.
Is that likely, Linus, to happen?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
It
because
is.
they're so expensive, I wouldn't think they'd want them in water they couldn't see if they sank. Because several that are on the bottom of the reflecting pond.
And those little guys, I say little guys, some of them
Yeah,
are
they can
2 or 3 feet long.
Yeah.
Right.
They move at a pretty good clip.
I would argue that those would likewise be prohibited.
Well, I read that, and as
Yeah.
soon as I was thinking,
Yeah.
and that just immediately, that was first thing that popped in my head was an RC type
Yep.
watercraft.
Because it is motorized, so as motorized, it would technically fall
Yes.
under the
And they can run
provisions.
10, 15,
Right.
20 miles an hour
Yeah.
easily.
I think my position would remain the same. I don't think I would want to exempt the remote control devices.
So I wanted to just throw that out there.
Yeah. Excellent question.
Well, I think if you wanted to, you could always issue a permit if somebody wanted to do it.
Correct.
But the likelihood of small boats and such disturbing the wildlife is very high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of our ponds and such are wildlife centric.
Correct. Oh, the other thing that reminded me, the other bigger change that we are proposing that wasn't previously within our park rules pertain to drones. So we do periodically receive questions about drones. Some park systems have very hard, don't want drones anywhere. We haven't taken that position, but we do believe there's areas where drones are inappropriate. Over the water park, over splash pads, over the dog park, areas where, over playgrounds, places where we don't want to discourage, quite frankly, creepy behavior. Additionally, we want to ensure that it's clear that drones cannot be used to torment someone or animals, because obviously, again, as Mark stated, we're a wildlife-friendly park, and we don't want people using drones and chasing after people. So that is included and something that's new within the proposed rules.
Mark?
That was the question I was going to ask Michael about drones, but with this language, then that sort of segues into, then it's acceptable outside of those areas within the parks.
Correct. Sort of the same philosophy that we've taken for, like, people when they used to, I don't see it so much anymore, but shooting off bottle rockets. As long as they're doing it safely, we haven't taken a strong position against that. Obviously, always subject to, if we start seeing people abusing it and it becoming an issue, then we can always amend the rules and make a stronger prohibitions against drones. But based on our current non-policy with regard to this, we really haven't had issues. So, and when people have asked, we've basically, these are the rules that we provided from a administrative standpoint, but this way it's established clearly.
I've got one more thing.
Go ahead, Linus.
Now, this next comment I have, it's just a comment. And the bullet point that says specifies equines are prohibited in parks, greenways, unless used by law enforcement. My wife has a T-shirt. When the Monon Trail was being pitched by the grassroots committee, that shows horses on the T-shirt, they're going to use horses on the Monon. and they were pushing for that in 99, 98, and Judy could probably recall that. And as a matter of fact, my wife, I just saw that T-shirt within the last month, and it had the horse on it because they were saying, oh, we're going to have horses on the trail. I just wanted to call that out, that originally there was a conversation about, we're going to have horses on the Monon. We all know that didn't happen, but just wanted to put that
That
in there
would
for the
have,
record.
that would have been an unmitigated disaster based on the current usage. We specifically used the word equine too, because as I was looking at the definition of that, it covers more than horses, but also covers donkeys and mules and stuff. So that way, we were trying to avoid, well, it's not a horse. Well, I don't care. It's still not allowed.
That's just for the record.
Well, and Linus is absolutely correct, and we had a huge discussion about that before the Monon was ever paved. And the issue was that we could not make the greenway wide enough without taking the ballast all the way down. And it came from some of the trails over at Little Miami that we'd seen that is really wide and flat and can accommodate horses, and, yeah. But I was curious whether it had been an issue. I haven't seen any horses on ever, but.
It hasn't been an issue. There was a time when the city judge was debating what type of fines could be an issue and whether or not horses were allowed, and was his position that they could be allowed. Never was an issue, but I'm just
If-
wanting to make it crystal clear.
Yeah, if they were not banned, they
Yeah.
could, yeah, okay.
Mr. Gerritsen has a
Jim,
question.
go ahead.
You got quite a bit here about human cremains. I wasn't aware that was an issue.
We've received several requests, partially through some of the local funeral homes, and especially for our Hindu community of wanting a means to spread their loved ones' ashes. In the Hindu faith, the tradition is to place it in flowing water, so more applicable to the White River or any of the parks that have a creek going through it. But that was what sparked the conversation, validated that state law allows the spreading of human remains. So then we looked at policies from other park systems and ultimately determined that the National Park Service probably had the most comprehensive and understandable rules as it pertained to that. So that's where our proposed language is modeled off of.
As I understand it, they could be spread, but there could be no memorial.
Correct. That to us was very important because we didn't want it to be viewed by family members, loved ones as sacred ground, and this expectation that they can put memorials or crosses or stuffed animals, that they can prohibit the development of a future trail or whatever it might be. So that was something that we considered and explicitly ensured that you're welcome to spread in appropriate places, but, you know,
Well,
For one and done.
are we requiring that they notify us first, or?
that,
We'll have a form that they fill out and request a permit officially from the department that will provide them if it's approved.
And you will notify the funeral homes of this?
yeah, we'll reach out and let them know of this process because they were referring them to us originally, and we just didn't have a formalized process. So as soon as we promised, as soon as we had a formalized process, if one was adopted, that we would let them know so that they can include that in their discussions with the families when arrangements are made.
Okay.
Jen, you want to go ahead? and then we'll go.
I just want to be clear, you said spreading human remains. You do mean that they have to be cremated first, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Cremains. yes.
Cremains.
Linus?
This might be my last statement. I said, Mike, has there been any consideration regarding what we're talking about here on greenways and in parks about wintertime activities? So I know we talked about, it's mentioned here motorized, that covers snowmobiles. But there's other wintertime activities that can take place that don't involve motors. So let's just say cross-country skiing. And I've seen that on the Monon, but I know we really get after the Monon pretty early with regards to snow removal, which kind of pushes that, makes that go away. But has there been any other thoughts with regards to other winter activities?
So historically, we have, when people have inquired about that, we've never prohibited cross-country skiing. Some of our trails, especially, the non-paved trails are not, do not have snow removal and stuff. So, I mean, when people say, hey, can we do that? We've let people know that they're more than welcome to go on those trails. But the greenways, if you will, those are, Monon, of course, highest priority, but White River Greenway will be likewise. Those will get taken care of pretty quickly, so there's usually not much opportunity for cross-country skiing on the greenways themselves, but the other trails, yes.
Michael, how many miles of trails do we have?
I'll have to get back with you. I can't, I have a lot of statistics, but not that one in my head.
No ballpark,
Well, I'd be afraid because I'd underestimate.
over 100?
Within the city as a whole, yes, over 100. Within the park system,
Probably.
100 probably feels too
Too much.
high. I would guess more in like the 40 miles range.
Do we remove the snow from all of that?
No, just the paved trails.
All of the paved trails?
And not necessarily all the paved trails, the major routes. So the Monon Greenway, White River, some of the trails within Central Park, but not necessarily all of them, at least not initially.
So does that include Hagenberg and
Yes.
and Greyhound
Yeah,
Pass?
Hagenberg and
Greyhound.
Greyhound Pass are
Or Greyhound Trail.
cleared in conjunction with the Monon.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Just a couple questions. So sunrise to sunset, and again, I acknowledge that all of this is enforcement and there's also common sense involved, so bear with me on my questions. Are you really thinking like the time, because usually it's still lighter or darker after? I have seen some park systems who do more of a dawn to dusk type of timing. I mean, I know it's just vocab, but kind of where's your head with that?
Because before it was a half an hour before sunrise to half an hour before sunset, that also was kind of confusing. We also have a number of parks, Central Park, for example, especially, but Founders Park with Wilfong Pavilion and West Park with Jill Perlman Pavilion. Obviously, we have activities sometimes, depending on the time of the year, after hours. And of course, we explicitly excluded activities in those. But generally speaking, when it's light out, we're not going to shoo people out of the parks, and the police aren't going to shoo someone out of the parks unless they're doing something that they really shouldn't be doing.
The second thing is, once these are approved and you guys go through your process, I think, it's probably part of the plan as an education regarding to our community, especially regarding bike speed. My bike has a speedometer on it, and 15 doesn't feel very fast.
Correct.
So I can see if your bike didn't, that you would have no idea and be ignorant to the fact of how fast you were going. So I think that is something, and if you could have the technology to let people know how fast they're going, I think that would be good. And then for the motorized RC boats, one idea too is perhaps a size limit, because I do think that there's little ones that is probably nice and would be something to get people out in the parks, and I think it would be really nice. But yet, if you're talking about 2-3 feet yachts, then that's probably not such a great idea. So that's just a consideration when
Sure.
you're doing your research. And that's all.
Thank you.
And any other questions? Do we feel like we are ready to make a motion to approve, or do you want to carry this over? What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to carry it over. A little
another
more
look.
time to study it.
Take another look? Okay. Then the appropriate thing would be to table, or not table, just, how do we?
I move to table the resolution P 2024-002 until our next meeting.
Does that require a second, counsel? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Linus, okay. All right. And then, so that takes care of it, right? We don't have to vote, is what I remember. Okay.
One final thing, since is tabled, I will likely add a component within the resolution that also allows reconciliation in the event that city council, or this will also be, I'm sure, reviewed by Corporation Council for the city. Again, the goal is to ensure that the park rules and city code remain the same. So if there are changes made either at the council level or based on recommendations from Corporation Council or the city's legal counsel, that we have a process established for reconciliation.
Okay, that's good. So it doesn't have to keep ping-ponging back
Correct.
and forth. Okay.
Have you been on a bicycle going 15 or 20 miles an hour?
Sure.
I'm asking Michael.
Yes, but I will tell you that as someone that prefers walking to biking, I haven't been on a bike in a number of years.
No, mine more years than yours.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could, but I'm still concerned about, well, what you have said. And when you got a wide open, there aren't many people on there and you want to go a little faster, and how you judge that and how the court's going to interpret it, I'm not comfortable with it yet.
As a person who cycles and bikes a lot, and I do have an e-bike, so that helps me get that little push. I do think that 15 is acceptable. I think the times where I go faster than that are when there's nobody around, which probably is not a problem if there's nobody around, and then also if I'm passing. So I think you can reasonably pass 15 and not have a problem. It is nice to cut loose, but I usually, when I do that, I'm way at the north side of the Monon, way out past Westfield when there's not a stitch of people, so.
I think ultimately it's a very similar, I mean, one, I don't see a lot of police out on the Monon, but we do know that this has been probably the number one complaint that we have on the Monon, that the community is receiving, that counselors are receiving and stuff. So this is to spark the conversation about, okay, what is appropriate for the Monon, recognizing how busy it is. I think with a lot of things that pertain to park usage, it's about common sense and common courtesy, and you can't regulate and enforce everything. But when people are misusing it and law enforcement's there, this will provide them the mechanisms to, just as it does for people misusing the roads, to actually have an arm of enforcement.
One more thing, I just will add that I believe that city enforcement for what is considered an electric bike versus a motorized vehicle tops out at 20 miles an hour. So they don't even, so I mean, that would be like the max speed that they would be able to go anyway.
And I noticed the police did put on, I think it's Facebook, a thing about beginning to educate people about stopping at the stop signs and what behavior is at the crossing. So they're getting on board with that too, which I think is helpful,
Absolutely.
coming from them, yeah. Okay, the next item is consideration of the Park Resource Officer Agreement. Michael?
Thank you very much. This one, we've obviously had several conversations, especially through the budgeting process, with regard to the Park Resource Officer Program. One of the things that's necessary to implement it is to ensure that we have an agreement between us and the City of Carmel as executed by or approved by the Board of Public Works. So working with first staff, our staff, and the Carmel Police Department, we identified the frameworks, at least from a contractual standpoint, of what we felt was necessary, largely modeling off the contract that's in place between the City of Carmel and Carmel Clay Schools for the School Resource Officer Program. The contract has been reviewed by both myself and the police chief, as well as by our legal counsel. We have been prompting Corporation Counsel to complete their review, but what's important for us is to get a contract in place, because the police, is our understanding, have begun some of the acquisition of the equipment that's necessary to implement the program. And the intent is our responsibility is to pay for those expenses. We have appropriated funds to do so this year, but we can't pay the police until we have an agreement in place. So this is my attempt to push the subject. Again, the draft agreement that was provided was reviewed by Brian. So it's something that he's currently comfortable with. We don't anticipate any significant changes as Corporation Council looks through it, because again, it's modeled off of an existing agreement the city has. But what this and what we're asking the park board to do tonight, if so inclined, is to grant myself, with the consent of the park board president and legal counsel, to negotiate and execute an agreement with the city so that we can get this contract in place. Recognizing that we're getting close to the end of the year, instead of having the finalized agreement, we know we got something that's going to be really close to where it is. We wanted to be able to be nimble so that we can sign it as soon as the Board of Public Works approves it, and get the police the funds that they'll need to begin implementing elements of the program. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Questions for Michael? Go ahead, Katie.
First of all, I am extremely excited for you. Having a highly trained school resource officer in all of our schools is one of the things I'm most proud of my time working with Carmel Clay Schools. It is such an incredible asset. I love that you're basing your program off this, because I do think it's a great program. So I just have a couple questions. Will these be trained like our school resource officers have extra training in regards to like relationship building and education? Are these officers going to have any additional training?
So what we're envisioning is, actually, we anticipate, especially in the early part of the program, that they'll go through the exact same training that the SROs go through, because
Correct.
again, that is really important training. That's the model, that's the type of, we don't want this to just be enforcement. We want it to be education. We want it to be coaching. We want it to be public outreach. We also have been looking at some programs that are out there, like we saw a program that is really geared towards state parks and county parks, which tend to have, at a higher propensity, park rangers. So we're looking at some of the ranger programs that are out there to see if there's that training that gets SROs aren't going to necessarily know the natural side of things, the parky side of things. So we want to make sure that they're also getting some of that training in how to interact with people outside of the walls of a campus. So we are looking at those opportunities jointly with the police department, and this agreement envisions that us identifying exactly what those additional training programs are. But we've already had those discussions about some ideas of where we think, and obviously, just like any training program, sometimes it looks really good on paper. You get there and it's like, well, this. So, we'll be, that's why we don't want to specify exactly which ones, because if there's better programs out there, we want to be able to adjust and move there. But yes, we definitely want to make sure that in addition to the exact training that the SROs are getting, that we find some that relate to policing in a park setting.
So with that, it took us a long time to add to staff for our SROs because they needed that specialized training. One of my favorite phrases that our previous police chief said is that there are some police officers who would much rather walk into a drug deal with a SWAT team than a kindergarten classroom. You really need to make sure that you have the right personality fit, not only just like the tactical training. And so they also can't just remove an officer off the street protecting the city right now to work that. Have you gotten any estimates with how long it may take to add to staff?
Based on conversations that we have, they think that they'll be able to fill them probably spring, summer of next year. Word's gotten out about this program, so there's actually a fair amount of interest in it with only 2 positions. So they feel that, and again, you're absolutely right. It takes the right person, and we want someone that has that the softer skills that not necessarily all patrolmen, for example, may necessarily have and or need
Or want.
So yes, we're cognizant of it. The police department is definitely also cognizant, but they feel that they'll be able to fill the positions. The key is not finding the right people for ours, but infilling, like, because they fully anticipate it'll be existing officers that move into this program, but infilling their positions in the other areas. That's what's going to be, dictate exactly when it gets staffed.
Perfect. Last question is, will they also be working on like the Monon Trail?
Yes, so.
Kind of goes back to our first
It-
conversation.
Absolutely. So, they will be housed out of the Monon Community Center. Obviously, we have a lot of people going through that facility, especially when you add the water park season into it. So that'll be an area of focus for them, but it won't be the sole focus. They will be going out to the parks, the greenways. They're not restricted to Central Park. The conversations we've had is that it's important for them to get to the other places, to get on the Monon based on, the challenges of popularity that we have on that incredibly successful greenway. So yes, they'll be broadly throughout the park system. Obviously, they can't be everywhere all the time, but they will be going to where we see challenges, issues, and opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Jim?
In terms of who they're responsible to, let's say that it's 4th of July, you're going to have a mess of people at the water park. Who directs where they go? Who are they responsible to their police department or to any of our people?
So they will be full-fledged Carmel police officers, and their reporting structure, just as it is for the SROs, is through the hierarchy of the police department. They will be tasked with being in our parks, and that's their primary responsibility. But if there's a greater need within the community, just as it is for the SROs, they could be called off. Now, for some of our regular operations, like at the water park, we already have off-duty sheriff's deputies that staff that and provide us security services, especially on the weekends, on key holidays. This program won't replace that, so we'll still have that type of coverage. This is just taking our enforcement, our policing, our proactiveness to a higher level than what we've done historically.
Do you have any authority over them?
I do not have any authority over them, and our staff will not, but we do have the power of the purse. That's why it was important for us to not have the money go, the money for this program is being funded out of the general fund, which is 100% funded by the city of Carmel. But what we did intentionally is have that appropriation come to the park board, to our general fund, and have this contract agreement so that if there are issues, one, we have a contract that says, here's what you can and can't do, you're not following that. And ultimately, if the program isn't successful, we can pull the plug. So I don't anticipate that. I really do not anticipate that based on the SRO success of the SRO program, but we have the power of the purse.
Okay.
Mark?
Okay, a simpler question. Since we built an office for these officers when we built the Monon Community Center, are they going to use that office now, many years later?
I believe that is Helen's office, yeah. Yeah, that is the office that we have identified for the park resource officers. So,
Well,
that
I'm glad it's come
vision
full circle
that the
finally.
park board and we had back in the mid-2000s and construction in 2007 is finally coming full circle.
So I would entertain a motion then, which we have not done yet. Jim?
I move to grant the director CEO authority to negotiate and execute a park resource officer agreement with the city of Carmel in a form substantially similar to the provided draft with the consent of the park board president and legal counsel.
Second.
Second, Linus, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Old business. Any old business?
Madam President, I'm pleased to announce that we have no old business.
Great. Attorney's report. Zach?
Yeah, just a couple things. Since we last met, just a couple routine matters. We've been working on finalizing the 111th Street easement with Duke Energy, and we've worked with CCPR staff on bond allocations and the third amendment to the interlocal.
Okay. Okay. Now the director's report. Dealing with sand. I loved your closing. Michael, go
Sand
ahead.
is such a fun thing. So a couple items, I did email out the written report, but a couple things that I wanted to highlight. First, some upcoming meetings that are definitely important for us as an organization. Of course, on Thursday, 6 p.m., 11:14, we will have the joint meeting with the City Council and the Township Board to review the proposed 2025 through 2029 Comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It'll be a high-level overview for the council, not as extensive as some of the overviews that the Park Board has received, but we want to make sure that they understand the process, the big picture of the feedback that we've received from the public, as well as the big picture strategies that are being proposed within that new comprehensive master plan. Of course, we'll end the conversation because one of the strategic goals, as well as one of our forward focus, is fixing the funding. So we will have some, no doubt, conversation with regard to that, but important for all of you that are available to please attend that meeting. Second, the City Council's Land Use and Special Studies Committee will be having a meeting on Wednesday, the 20th of November. This is when the proposed third interlocal is still in that committee, even though on Monday there will be a council meeting. They haven't revisited the third amendment, so that'll be discussed at that land use committee meeting. I anticipate zero issues with getting a favorable recommendation from them, but there'll be some further discussion about funding at that. So certainly encourage board members to be present if possible.
Michael, do you need board members for support for that land use meeting like last time, or?
If available, I think this would be a good one to have at least some board members. That one's at 5:30. Most of the meetings are at 6, but that one is at 5:30, and that's at the Carmel Clay Public Library, the main library, second floor conference room. So yes, if you are available, at least if we can have a couple board members there, I think that would be favorable. On December 2nd is when the City Council, I fully anticipate, will be considering and adopting, hopefully, that third amendment. So again, as a show of support, that would be a good one to come to. At the same meeting, we will have a appropriations request. Actually, it'll probably be viewed as appropriations, but it's really a transfer. The grant funds that we've received from the READY grant under state rules have to go, as the city as our fiscal agent and the controller as our fiscal officer. Those dollars first have to be deposited into the city's grant fund before they're transferred into one of our funds. So for the READY grant, we didn't get all the money at once. We get it as we submit for reimbursables. So we're going to be sweeping those dollars into the 103 fund to reimburse expenses and bring the balance in that fund up higher. We also will be sweeping in the $1 million grant that we had received from Hamilton County a year or two ago, around the same time that we got the READY grant. So we'll sweep that into the 103 fund because we will as well be earning the interest on it as opposed to the city. So that will also be on that council agenda. And again, that requires an ordinance. So councilors Taylor and Snyder have agreed to sponsor that so that we have it moving forward. At next Monday's city council meeting, the city council is moving some of the funds that are within their budgets into their special projects line. And it is anticipated that once that occurs, that city council will be donating $20,000 to the Carmel Clay Parks Foundation. So that was information that I received from Councilor Snyder, who is advocating for that. So the idea, especially if we're successful in one of our funding strategies of having the legislature approve the means for a referendum, that this could be a funding source to help do a campaign, public awareness campaign for any future referendum. So I think that's the idea behind it, but I anticipate the foundation being the recipient of $20,000 of dollars from City Council. I am pleased to announce, and the hardware is here in front of us, that we received from the Indiana Park and Recreation Association the Excellence and Resource Improvement Award for River Heritage Park. This was, of course, one of the parks that was part of our Reimagining Parks initiative and funded through the Clay Township Impact Program, but was recognizing the transformation of that park, the resourcefulness of the environmental stewardship that was used with that, as well as the accessibility features that have always been a hallmark of that park since Everybody's Playground was developed many years ago. So I'm pleased to share that with the park board. And then, of course, President Hagan mentioned once the council adopted the various budgets, it approved or appropriated the $1.5 million for the refresh and improvements in Founders Park. One of the things that, as we discussed through the budget cycle, is improvements, refreshing really of the playground. And one of the challenges that we have with the playground in Founders Park is the sand. The sand has been popular with many families. I won't say universally popular because we also have received complaints about the sand, but there are certainly many families that enjoy it because you don't find a lot of parks with sand play elements. But there may be a reason that you don't find many parks with sand play elements because of the operational challenges that it creates. Specific for Founders Park, all of the safety surfacing in there is the poured-in-place rubber surfacing, which of course is pervious. It's designed so that water will flow through it. And what happens is that sand migrates through a variety of means, none of it ill-intended, throughout the playground, and gets into that safety surfacing. And over time, even though we do try to blow it, we've tried to vacuum it, we've tried a variety of different means, that sand gets embedded into the safety surfacing. And that safety surfacing under playground safety standards is supposed to have a certain level of cushioning. And I'm not using the technical term because doesn't mean anything to anyone except for certified playground safety inspectors and park geeks. But basically what happens is the sand packs into that safety surfacing and it no longer has the required cushioning levels. Additionally, because of the sand, the seams and places where the borders of the safety surfacing have pulled apart, which creates bigger gaps that the sand gets in and just exacerbates that problem. And again, as I mentioned, it's a pervious surface which is intended for the water to flow through, but it also can trap the water in, which exacerbates the freeze-thaw cycle. So those have all created challenges for us. Sand getting on the playground equipment also can create at times slippery surfaces. Sand acts like sandpaper at times, so it also can create issues with the finishes of the playground surface. Once everyone's done, even though we have a cleaning station nearby, it is not uncommon to see people also use the sinks to clean off the kiddos' hands and feet, which then gets into the plumbing system and creates backups there. So those are all challenges that we have to manage and work with. And our original idea was to simply remove the sand, bring in some water features, because the thought was if we're going to take something that is appreciated by many visitors, that we want to bring something that's back. Some of the feedback that we've heard is that, some families have really enjoyed, one, the sand, but two, also having a place where kids don't get wet. And I can understand that. You can choose to go to a park where you can get in a splash pad during the summers, but you can also choose to go to a park that doesn't have water features. And we weren't envisioning a splash pad, so you wouldn't get as wet, but it still could be a factor. So we're gonna weigh that in. We also are working with Y Engineering, which is developing the construction documents for the refresh of this park, and exploring, is there a way that we can continue to provide a sand play experience by using a different surfacing, like artificial turf. Hearing some challenges with that as we've talked with manufacturers and other park systems that have beaches nearby. That may not be the solution, but we're still investigating it. Maybe there's a way we reduce the size of it so it's not as much sand and as big of an issue. But again, I'm not sure that's going to mitigate it. Maybe we provide sand play in a completely different experience, but then you have the challenges of having two different types of play experiences in different places. We may ultimately come to the conclusion that there is no prudent way to provide safety, long-term sustainability, and the financial associated expenses to keep the sand. But we haven't given up on it yet. So more to come, more to investigate. But I did at least want to make sure the park board was aware of it, because we did get some feedback with regard to that. We don't get a lot of pushback from the public on much of anything. So when we hear even a little bit of it, our ears go up, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. This is a park that we're not doing a master plan for, because it really is refreshing. I mean, other than potentially the sand and the idea of originally of maybe putting some water features, the playground was going to be exactly the same, just with a new safety surface. When we do that, just like we did for Westermeyer Commons, we don't get public input because it's a safety issue. But when we do receive feedback, we do listen to it, and we will take that into our consideration as we evaluate and determine the appropriate path forward, and I'll keep the park board informed as we determine what is and isn't feasible with that. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Questions, Mark?
I want to go on record, and you can tell Michael Korshal this. I was opposed to the sand originally and overruled by some park board members.
Go ahead, Tim.
Are we
Noted.
going to explore the options of not putting in water, though, for, something else?
We are. That was one of the things that was in some of the messaging that I saw was a compelling thing. I do think that our idea was we wanted something that was cool, but I also can understand the parents' perspective of having different types of play experience options, not all of which include water. So, and one of the things that is appealing to me, if we don't have the water features, which would have been more expensive in the tunes of $200,000, those are dollars that might then become available for the boardwalk that we've always wanted to have in that park. So, and has been incorporated in past master plans. So, yeah, I think there's a high probability that water won't go there, but if we do have to remove the sand, we still want to create some type of new experience.
Oh, I think we should definitely create something cool, but I do think that we should explore something that doesn't have water, because so many of our other parks do have really cool water features, and they are within a short drivable distance. That if you're hearing that, it would be nice, because I think that there are certain children who maybe for whatever reason can't play in water, or it's not safe for them to play in water for whatever reason, right? So I think that could be a park for that.
I completely agree.
There's also some parents who don't want their kids to get sand or water all over them. So it would be very nice to take your child to a park where they leave relatively clean. So I know. Mine are high school now. I'm past that point, but there were dreams a long time ago.
Well, it's not like there isn't water in that location. 'cause
Well, there is
the
water,
lagoon.
it's just
Yeah,
in the
it's
lagoon,
part
so.
of it, yeah.
Yeah, no, like I said, while we have, when that came out, we heard, and a lot of the feedback was just what we saw, social media post on the article, not necessarily direct context to us, although we did have some of that. But over the history of that park, we have definitely heard from parents that definitively do not like the sand.
Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, Michael. So let's move on to information items. Josh is not here, so we won't have Plan Commission. Katie, is this your last school board report?
It is. So, December marks my retirement, I'm gonna call it, from the Carmel Clay School Board from past 8 years. I have served a total of 3 on the Parks Board, so thank you so much for that. And then 2 years on the Redevelopment Commission, so I'm very excited to not have any meetings for a while. But with that, in January, you will have 2 new board members, so that's very exciting for our board. And in January, we're also going to start our strategic plan for the district. So Dr. Ostrike, who's our successor superintendent, is going to be leading that project. We are going to be doing a survey campaign with the entire city, so reaching beyond just our parents and families to get information about what they would like to see as a future of Carmel Clay Schools. So starting in January, you will see that, and then we're hoping to have that kind of tied up by the summer to start presenting. So that will be something, we're very lucky to have that nice transition between Dr. Beresford and Dr. Ostrike so that he can already start working on it. And then when he takes over in July, that it will kind of be full swing ahead. So very exciting times. Again, thank you all for the time that I've been able to serve on the Parks Board. I will be here on Thursday, but I just want to make sure I did a little thank you as I was here tonight. So thanks, that's it.
And thank you, Katie, for your service too, because you've been quite loyal and have helped make the quorum on occasion. So thank you very much for your service. Park Foundation, I will just have in response to the grant from the DNR for the invasives, I think the department got the full 25. The Park Foundation had already pledged 20, and we will have the plan is to have the other 5 for you. So we're going to be meeting in December, and I think we've got the funds to do that easily. So I think you can count on it. So the other good news is from the city council, this is a whole new thing. Okay, well, I'll get the update on that. The Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee Eric, is there anything to?
Nothing to report. We haven't met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 4th.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to Park Board comments and discussion. Any questions, discussion? Comments?
I have something.
Go ahead, Linus.
Recently, there were new signs installed along the Monon Greenway with rules and regulations and guidelines and things of that nature. Noticed the other day in my travels along the Monon Trail that those signs are only populated on one side. And the backside, if you were to just say the backside, whatever you want to call the backside, one side doesn't have any information whatsoever, it's plain aluminum. I don't know why we didn't populate, or shouldn't say we, but why both sides weren't populated with the same information. I know when they post those signs, they're really facing traffic going in a particular direction, either northbound or southbound. However, the backside of that being just blank made me think of a blank slate, either for tagging, or could we put something on there as a department to enhance that information? Could we put an applique on there? Could we put a skin on it of some type? I'm not even sure what it would be, but I think there's an opportunity there. It's literally a blank slate, and they're large. You know what I'm talking, how big they are. And there's room there for something.
I don't
I
disagree.
don't want somebody to say, oh, I can tag that because there's nothing else there.
I don't disagree with you, and I won't get into specifics, but we've had some major challenges with where the signage was placed, so there's a high probability that it's not placed correctly and has to be moved. Additionally, when the signs were installed, they were scratched and damaged, so we'll keep the board informed kind of where we go with that as well.
Okay.
We may have to replace most of the signs, let's put it that way.
So was the intent to have something on both sides and you just stopped it or not?
My guess is that it depends on which sign you're talking about or the location. I'd have to talk to Michael Allen, our P&R director, just to figure out specifically which sign you're talking about and where it was supposed to be placed originally. My guess is that it's not supposed to be placed in a location that can be viewed from both directions. That's my guess.
A lot of the rule signs, based on my recollection, that looking at where they were supposed to be placed, were the signage, so that if this is the trail, it's like this with the back, with vegetation behind it, and stuff, so that both sides of the sign would never be visible by other people. So that's probably what it was supposed to be, but without knowing the specific location.
And I'll just throw this in there. So in the Midtown area, there's not a lot of vegetation
Sure.
to hide one side. So it's going to be pretty much wide open. And the one that just comes to my mind and sitting here thinking about it is that First Street Northwest and the Monon, which is immediately north of Bub's. That's the one that comes to mind.
We didn't
It's
add it.
facing south.
Yeah. We didn't really add any signage in the central core because a lot of that was done with the renovations to like the Monon Boulevard and stuff, but, let's talk offline
Sure.
and discuss it, because my guess is that's one of the signs that was placed in the incorrect location.
And 4.
Anything else to come before the board this evening? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Jen. We are adjourned.
I'll see you the 14th. No. Thursday. Where is that?